Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's penultimate edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuya Mvogo. The only story, I should say, on the show this evening.
What is important is choosing a path or a route that, first and foremost, is in the interest of the country.
President Cyril Ramaphosa decides not to address the nation this evening. We'll tell you why.
The president and his government have now lost the mandate and the legitimacy to govern.
ANC must deal with its internal issues as to who becomes president, but this one must leave office as soon as yesterday.
We are still on the campaign for president of the ANC as Jiki.
Anybody that we believe has serious accusations to answer for would be required to step aside.
I'm of the firm view, and I've got confidence in the leadership of Comrade Cyril that will do the right thing.
There are areas that have to be investigated by SARS or the Reserve Bank or the Hawks.
We'll also take you through the president's options, as well as who and what may assist or block him in whatever final decision he decides to take. The Watchdog starts now.
What happens if they say he's got a case to answer? What do we do? Bill? Because the population out there, its own conclusion will be, there's something wrong there. Wrong, maybe wrongly, because indeed somebody must be innocent until proven guilty.
The question posed by the former president in October has come to fruition. The Section 89 independent probe into the Palapala Saga has found, among other things, that President Cyril Ramaphosa has a case to answer. This is just weeks ahead of the 55th ANC National Elective Conference, which will see him contest for a second term as ANC president. Since the revelation of the robbery of alleged foreign currency at Ramaphosa's Limpopo farm, members of the ANC have made their opinions known. ANC NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu has boldly stated that Ramaphosa should be subjected to the step-aside resolution of the ANC in light of the Palapala matter.
I would propose, as we go into the next conference, that anybody that we believe has serious accusations to answer for would be required to step aside. For instance, the Palapala issue for me, would call for that, until all of us are quite certain that there is nothing wrong, nothing illegal about that. But for as long as it keeps hanging on the president, it keeps hanging on everybody else. It's not fair to us. I don't think it's fair to him either.
With the eventuality that there may be a prima facie case for Ramaphosa to answer, he could be the face of the ANC that could be charged.
The ANC has for many years been able to deal with moments of crisis. I have confidence that at that particular point, if we have such an eventuality, the ANC will rise to the occasion.
Meanwhile, ANC Northern Cape chairperson Zamani Saul has said that he has confidence that Ramaphosa has a level of integrity to make the right decision.
I'm of the firm view, and I've got confidence in the leadership of Comrade Cyril that he will do the right thing. I trust that he will do the right thing, and I'm certain that he's not going to disappoint the country in doing the right thing. If he's found wanting around the issues of Palapala, there is something criminal about it. I'm of the firm view that he will definitely address the nation and say what everybody would expect from him.
NEC member Tony Yengeni says he feels vindicated by the finding.
We've been saying to him, he must step aside or resign to give the process of investigation a chance. Because there are areas that have to be investigated by SARS or the Reserve Bank or the Hawks. etc. And being the person who has appointed a number of those officials, he must give those officials a chance to do their job.
With the 2024 elections around the corner, all eyes are on the ANC conference, which will possibly produce South Africa's next leaders. Following the independent probe, suspense continues to build and the nation is waiting with bated breath on how President Ramaphosa will respond to these findings. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, for almost 24 hours now, the nation has been on tenterhooks as President Cyril Ramaphosa and the governing party ponder whether he should step aside or not on the back of that report. And of course, the implications of whatever final decision he and the ANC will have to make. It was in fact around this time last night that we first had a glance of former Chief Justice Ngobo's panel's report on whether President Ramaphosa has a case to answer on Palapala. Since then, reactions have been coming thick and fast, at times ranging from drama to a pure farce. But in the next hour, we're going to try and cut through the noise as we try to make sense of both the legal and political ramifications of the precarious state in which the president is in, and of course the utterances of some of the key players who can make things better or worse for the president, some of whom you saw in that clip that we just played. With me in studio is political analyst and author Professor Susan Boyson. Next to her is legal analyst Ritume Zipiri. And on the line we have another legal analyst, and that's Mpumelelo Zikalala, as well as another political analyst and governance specialist, and that's Sandile Swana. To kick us off, listen to what presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya had to say a little earlier, addressing journalists, telling them why the president has decided to make an about 10, at least for now, and decided not to address the nation this evening as was initially promised.
All options are on the table, but what is important is not so much the merits or the demerits of a particular option. What is important is choosing a path or a route that first and foremost is in the interest of the country. As I've said, with respect to the stability of government as well as the stability of the country itself. And so that's what will guide the president in thinking through a number of those options that are available to him.
I'll start with you, Prof. Is it about the stability of the country? In other words, is that what was weighing heavily, you reckon, in the president's mind right now?
Well, I reckon it is weighing pretty heavily, along with other factors like factional interest, stabilization of government. So it is about all of the above. And it is probably good that there is some balance between the personal factors and then the government and South African economy and society factors. We saw today some reaction on the markets, investment sentiment, currency, and I think that was a bit of a wake-up call too, that showed that even however strong, vicious those pressures inside the ANC are, to step down, to get a move on, to relieve the ANC from these pressures that the report brought. There is also the bigger picture, and that is, and also for this part of the ANC, the project they have been busy with, the renewalists versus the RETs, and to ensure for them, it is probably very important to ensure that that project is not left to flounder. And if they take a few steps now, it's probably not totally under their control, but they can probably be a more gradual, eased out transition if that is what we are facing inevitably.
Mr. Swana, Prof has mentioned, some of the things that have happened over the past 24 hours. And one would indeed imagine that there would be people who say, hey, look at what has just happened on the back of the release of this report. And can you imagine what will happen? We saw, for example, he was due to appear before the NCOP today to answer the questions that he's obligated to answer. Of course, there's often drama there whenever he appears, but it's something that he has to do. That has to fall by the wayside. By the way, he on his own decided not to go and appear before the NCOP. What we also saw happening was the Deputy President, Didi Mabuza, who was supposed, he leads the nation's fight against HIV and AIDS, and he had to tell everyone that he's no longer going there because as leader of government business, there's an urgent matter that he has had to attend to. Vincent Magwenya postponed his weekly briefings, which journalists these days look forward to. Again, what Prof, you were talking about, the rand falling by, I think, over 4%, to the dollar. All those things would definitely, say something about what could be wrong going forward. But the question is whether, he stands, between the nation being reported to by the head of the executive. In other words, is he the only person who can actually do that? Is he the reason that, the rand would go on a free fall in the event, he leaves? Your thoughts, Mr. Swana?
Thank you so much, Vio, and to my fellow panelists there. I think that we must be careful of being careless, really. In this sense, first of all, the British have run through, I think the last time I checked, we're almost on the 4th Prime Minister now, in a very short space of time, as they try to reposition themselves in the context of Brexit. That is our gold standard. Our former colonial masters who teach us what we do depending on your ideological stance. But I think when people talk about international benchmarking, they are teaching us to copy from our colonial masters. So that is not really to say that is the end of the British nation because of these changes in ministry. But again, the other side of the story is that there is another mistake that Thabo Mbeki was trying to prevent, and I do not know, Mashatile has not confirmed that he has prevented the mistake. Mbeki was saying a crisis management plan must be developed well ahead of time. If the panel comes with a particular set of findings, what do we do as the African National Congress in the ANC and in government? The legal experts were assisting Cyril Ramaphosa would have known what the scenarios are that can possibly happen.
Adds to that the ANC as well.
Plan.
Adds to that the ANC as well, the governing party.
Yes. So this applies both to the ANC and to the government, so that when the report comes out, the panel report comes out, you just pull out the crisis plan and you implement the crisis plan coldly, without panic, without cancellations, without making all sorts of random announcements all over the show. One would hope that Paul Mashatile will eventually emerge and say they did listen to Thabo Mbeki and prepare that plan and not plunge us into a totally avoidable crisis. And the other comment I want to make about this thing is that the events that we're talking about happened in Christmas Day 2019, which means it was after this person who's supposed to be cleaning up South Africa was in charge and continuing with the cleanup. And in his personal life and in his business life, he was continuing to commit illegal activities or unlawful activities, at least, that had predictable consequences and he was hoping that somehow it can continue to be covered up one way or the other. So we're not in the realm where everybody doesn't know. Cyril Ramaphosa would have known that if this were to be found out what I'm doing on my farm, these are the possible repercussions, and have a plan of how to deal with that and not plunge the nation and the ANC in crisis.
In fact, Paul Mashatile retort, Prof, a couple of days ago when our political editor Mzwandile Mbeje asked him about this, he said, well, we're agreed to have a meeting as the top four, since they are not the top six for the time being. We'll have a meeting. As soon as the report is released, we're going to meet so that we know exactly what to do and what to say when that report lands. As we have had this afternoon, a meeting that was scheduled for this evening has now been postponed till tomorrow, which suggests that what he actually said were measures that they'd put in place to deal with a crisis like we're facing now actually did materialize.
Yes, they thought they had it under control, and it was everything but. The exact repercussions of what was unfolding today had just not been planned for. And I think that is why we have the postponement of the president's address, etc., so that they can get some strategy to get it under control.
Mr. Zikalala, when people are saying, look, the president has various options still. And among them, it is, well, from what, remember, social media has been a buzz over the past 24 hours. Lawyers who are part of, WhatsApp groups or were prepared to dispense with their legal opinion on social media have also, entered the fray. And I've had a couple actually saying that even though this is not, Judge Ngobo's inquiry was limited in what it could actually, uncover in the time and with the mandate that they have, a possibility does exist. In fact, the law allows for the president to actually take this on review. Does he?
Maybe on that basis, it would be to say that the decision of Parliament to engage in this particular, let's say, pre-investigation panel was maybe unlawful or irrational or procedurally unfair. Now, even if he would take it to court, I don't think it would be a success, because all that this panel has done is to say, we are going to listen to the nature of the complaints and understand or take a decision of whether is there a need for a further investigation in this case. Now, from all sides, when it comes to the legalness of the legalities of all these processes and how the panel was formed, it is a creature which is created by Parliament. Parliament can be able to do that. On the type of rationality, the report is rational because it says, you do not dispute that there's a certain amount of money which was found in your farm. There's a certain amount of money that you have stored in a manner that you ought not to have stored it in. There's a list of statements that have come in. You yourself, as the president, provided a statement and not a sworn affidavit. So on that basis, you definitely have something to answer on, and you must answer all the relevant questions in a relevant committee, which is the impeachment committee, that is going to have all the power that it needs to even subpoena individuals at the end of the day. So all the impediments that prevented the Ngobo committee, the Judge Ngobo committee, in terms of delving deeper into this particular process, will then have all the powers to go even further. So on that basis, if you go to court, for me, I think it would be just, for lack of a better word, just time wasting. Just let the impeachment committee process get underway and be able to state your responses under those particular conditions and be able to answer and defend yourself for your actions.
Your thoughts, Mr. Piero, on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Bumelelo. I think there is possibly a technical legal angle, and that relates possibly to the standard that was applied to the test of what is serious misconduct and what is a serious constitutional or legal violation. Because when Parliament formulated those rules, they required a degree of bad faith on the part of the president. And I think what Judge Ngobo did was to say, well, it's almost superfluous. If you are already in the realm where you are breaching the law as a president, the standard required by the Constitution is so exacting on you that it's almost superfluous to require an extra layer of bad faith. So I think there is a slight technical legal argument that could be a basis for review, but I agree with him that it's not going to go anywhere, in the sense that, when you look at that report and you look at what the mandate was and what was required to be the recommendation to Parliament, I think it all sits together from a rationality perspective quite well.
I want to to both Prof and Mr. Swana, you know, on the whether or not it's superfluous, whether or not, you know, it'll be a waste of time. People do these things nevertheless. I mean, we've seen this movie so many times before. But is it something that he can stand up tomorrow or the next day and say, this is what I'm going to do, say it with a straight face, without fearing that someone may say, actually, you can't?
I don't believe so. I don't think he'd be able to say that quite confidently. And I think we should look at the report, and as Mpumelelo has said, you know, when you look at the evidence that was presented and which he had to respond to, and you look at what is actually common, there is actually a story here, and his responses left more questions than answers. So I don't believe he'd be able to confidently stand and say, I'm taking this report on review, when against the backdrop of these questions that he left hanging within the process himself.
Mpumelelo, you share that view?
Definitely. Maybe the other side would be to say, or the other question would be to say, if you're going to say you're taking this report on review, what is it that you seek to protect? What legal interest or what interest do you want the court to protect at the end of the day? Because all the processes were done in according to what the law and the legal prescripts actually say. So if everything has been done correctly and there's a finding that is there, unfortunately, that finding or those particular recommendations do not favor you. That's how things are. However, at the end of the day, you'll get a perfect opportunity of attending to these processes in a process which has much more legal teeth, that at the end of the day will deliver a much more definitive result other than these ones. So why delay the process of going into a proper forum, proper structure, that you'll be able to submit evidence in, that will be able to exonerate you at the end of the day if such evidence does exist. So going to court, yes, it's within your realm, you can do that. Now, nothing stops you from doing that. However, it's not going to assist in any manner if you want to project yourself as a president who is a law-abiding citizen, as a president who is the number one citizen of the country and wants to ensure that they comply with these provisions of Section 96 of being on the right side of the law and the right side of the Constitution.
On Tuesday, Prof, on the 6th, Parliament is supposed to deliberate on this report. And the opposition seems to be confident that there are enough people opposed to Cyril Ramaphosa staying on as ANC president to give them, you know, the vote that they may need to actually make sure that he is out. I don't know what you think about that.
Yes, interesting. When from the interim reactions from President Cyril Ramaphosa, one gets the idea that he does not want to risk going there.
And be embarrassed.
Exactly. You know, he could win, he could lose. But then we know the ANC, how it closes ranks. We saw that, and we've got that vivid recollection of the days of Jacob Zuma, when they were about 8 or so motions of no confidence that did not succeed. And it took a lot of organization, mobilization to get to the point where those motions were starting to pose a threat to former President Zuma. And so we see the ANC, how it closes ranks. And no factor helps the ANC unite ranks as a vicious opposition. And be really strident in their attacks like we've seen from the DA today as well. And that will tend to push the ANC towards closing ranks. And the caucus is quite tightly controlled. It has always been in the past. I see some opposition parties even asking whether there can't be a secret ballot to ensure that people can vote by conscience and not by party dictates.
You don't think, Prof, I mean, someone is going to say, hey, by any means necessary, we want this guy out. If this is the one opportunity we have, let's grab it with both hands.
I definitely think there will be some like that, but I think they won't be a majority. They'll probably be a significant minority at best. So I don't think just in Parliament getting that kind of vote in Ramaphosa's favor would be very reassuring to him. And that's probably why he's contemplating taking other steps now. and at least that is what we heard today, and then be able to say that he did well for the country by falling on his sword at this early stage. He'll probably have a little bit of heroism, of bravery, and sense of doing well for the nation left in his act. So I don't think he want to risk going there, but going there, I think the ANC will still win the majority necessary, but there will definitely be a few dissenters.
Mr. Swana, Ahmed, your thoughts on this one? Would someone who desperately wants Cyril Ramaphosa out miss an opportunity, even if it goes against, as Prof was saying, what they have done, I mean, traditionally? What if they say, look, I mean, we have a conference in 2 weeks' time, and from what we are being told, certainly in terms of the numbers, that Kgalema Motlanthe and his committee have given us about a week ago or so, I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa is a front runner by far. So someone who is in a very desperate position, do you think that they will miss an opportunity if one exists on Tuesday?
I think that we need to be careful of getting caught up in the drama around this, drama that is actually irrelevant. What is relevant here is that the panel was instituted properly as one step among at least 2 other steps that must follow, one of 3 steps. The second step to follow is a detailed parliamentary inquiry. I do not think the ANC would object to a detailed parliamentary inquiry, because that will also take its own time to do that. To actually try and kill this thing now will be very difficult. To say they are opposing what is in the report, and this report, everybody has got it. It was on WhatsApp, it's on every type of social media, every Tom, Dick and Harry, and it's clear, very clear, that the parliamentary inquiry must go. Otherwise, we're back now, we're on Zuma version 2. So the ANC cannot risk that political capital. So they'll agree to that step. The step where they can take a reckless, perhaps, action could be when they vote to keep Ramaphosa after the final report comes out against him. That would now be a reckless step. But I don't think we are there yet. The statements by Floyd that he should have been removed yesterday and so on and so forth, those are just political theatrics that are of little consequence, Lindwe Sisulu and others. But Cyril Ramaphosa is under extreme moral pressure right now, which is uncommon for an ANC president, because morals are not what the ANC trades.
Mr. Pierre, I mean, I'm trying to think, I mean, you've heard the DA today saying, you know, let's proceed to an election. We have a crisis here, but legally, I mean, surely, I mean, that can be where we are.
It's not that simple, because that would also require a parliamentary process, and the certain threshold would need to be met to be able to call an election at this particular point in time. So I guess the question is, why not continue with debating this panel report in Parliament, putting it to a vote insofar as the next step, the committee step, is concerned. And I think that is actually a more robust step for our democracy, because we're already one step ahead of what has happened with Jacob Zuma. You know, these rules came about as a result of Jacob Zuma, but this is the first time we're actually in a panel process, and I think it would be great for the development of the Constitution and the development of our democracy to actually see this process through. And I think that would be better for the country insofar as holding the president to account in future.
Mr. Sigalala, your thoughts on the DA saying we're in a crisis, let's go straight to an election? Has everything collapsed to the extent that, you know, we could, that should be the next step?
Not at all. I agree with Advocate Perry. In fact, to say our constitution was drafted in such a manner in which it provides for a balanced view and a balanced protection of all the interests and rights of the individuals or the stakeholders which are in Parliament. Now, if the DA feels that we've reached a stage where we've disintegrated in a manner in which you can't move, there are various motions that can be submitted in Parliament. For example, Section 102, a motion of no confidence in the whole cabinet, is what they could have used in order to achieve whatever purpose that there is. However, on this one, our constitution is clear. It says we want to provide an opportunity for the president or to go into a formal parliamentary inquiry in which those allegations are going to be tested. There can be evidence that can be led, and a committee is going to come back and tell us whether we are right or wrong, and the details findings as to the accuracy of those findings. And then the members of parliament will then have to go back and vote whether we should keep the parliament with the president or not. So there are various dispute resolution processes which are available in parliament, and the resignation of the president or going to elections is not always the best type of process that is there. We must also remember that it is South Africans that decided that we want the African National Congress to go into parliament and to go and govern. Now, we cannot know now whenever there's a crisis or disagreements or any scandals that crop up here and there, then say we're going to disregard the voice of the masses and not listen to what the masses have stated to us. We have to go back and check, what does the Constitution say? Let's go with those provisions of the Constitution because they allow for a system of self-rectification to take place, and for those that may have transgressed to be held accountable. So going back and saying that let's go to go back and vote in for a new political party, I don't think that's going to work. It's more on the political side and not really on the legal side.
If you've just joined us, we're looking at everything that has been brought about by that report by Judge Ngobo and his team on whether President Cyril Ramaphosa has a case to answer or not. The nation has been on tenterhooks since then. The governing party, President Cyril Ramaphosa himself, pondering whether he should step aside or not, and of course the implications of whatever decision they will have to take. That's what we're looking at this evening, trying to cut through the noise to really give you a sense of what is possible or what is legally but also politically. This conversation continues right after this. Of course, both the president's supporters and those who want him out as the president of the ANC are looking at this with a great deal of interest, but I bet you they didn't sleep last night. They're not going to sleep tonight ahead of that NEC meeting of the ANC that's supposed to take place at Nasrec starting tomorrow afternoon. But ahead of the release of that report, there was something peculiar actually happened. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who has made her intentions known that she does want to be the ANC's first woman president, sent out a very short message to her supporters. Take a listen to how it went.
Amandla, comrades, I want to just say thank you very much for the hard work. We are still on the campaign for president of the ANC as Jiki. It may not be easy, but it's in our hands. Let's go for it, comrade. Let's go for it. Amandla.
Mr. Swana, I found that message very, very interesting, coming the night before the report was released from someone who has been trailing, like seriously behind, and you could see the energy, you know, the zest and enthusiasm. I mean, in that message, I haven't seen that from her in a very long time.
My view in terms of, because I suppose that takes us to that nominations list. My view is that the list itself in the ANC can be, the thing that we can say about the list that people got nominated. It is not a predictor of who is going to win. number one. Number two, a lot of things can happen in the case of what happens between the nomination and the election. One of them, and it's a serious possibility in the ANC. The ANC has taken me from surprise to surprise. Cyril Ramaphosa could actually be red-carded. Regardless of what your analysis may be, regardless of what your sentiments may be, comrades are capable of anything. They can take him out and remove him from the race, one way or the other. So the buoyant spirits of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma are not misplaced, because until the final votes are counted, Mabuza showed us that it can still change in this direction or that direction. Mabuza showed us in 2017. And I expect that this year we're going to see even more drama. And Cyril is in danger of actually not making it for many, many different reasons.
Your view on this one, Prof?
Yes, it is quite possible that if Ramaphosa resigns as president of the country, that he will withdraw his nomination as president for the presidency of the ANC. I think those two go hand in hand. And that will create so much turmoil in that contest at Nasrec forthcoming. And because you can imagine, if those votes are released, that blocker votes, he has close to 2,000 at this stage, and I agree that that is far from a perfect indication as to how the vote will go, because there will be around, and possibly even just over 4,000 in total votes. So to have around 2,000, there are about 2,000 others that can be mobilized and united against you. And we know there's been some talk campaign possibly of the Ramaphosa's opponents uniting on one slate to oppose him. So there can be a lot of pandemonium if that is indeed going to materialize. So it is in that sense wide open already. It is going to be even much wider open if Ramaphosa's votes become released. And that's going to be a serious predicament for the ANC. How do you handle the nominations that are so overwhelming, the supportive of a person on the one hand, as opposed to that person withdrawing for legally seemingly very good reasons.
A quick one, Mpumelelo. I know you've got to jump off, but as a last question to you. I mean, notwithstanding what Mr. Swana was saying earlier about what Floyd Chiwambu and them had to say today, but they seem to be confident that if both the EFF and the ATM seem to be confident that if this matter was to go to a secret ballot, they would get the numbers that they need. And we know that in the past this has been a bone of contention. You know, several ANC speakers have rejected this notion, and that is what half the time has actually saved the previous ANC president. Just your thoughts on this one. What the speaker may or may not do, and there's a political element to this as well. But I'll canvass with both Mr. Swana and Prof later, and that is Nosvia Mapisa Ngakula's position in all of this, and some of the things that people have been saying, in fact, over the past few days. But just on granting them their wish of getting a secret ballot. Your thoughts on that one?
Well, we all know that when Parliament convenes, the various political parties will sort of group together and then decide how would you like this particular motion to go about. There's been legal precedents in terms of the secret ballot and how voting in Parliament should be. But the emphasis on that was that a member of Parliament swears off when they're being sworn in. They swear their allegiance to the South African Constitution and also to the legal principles that are applicable. So if you go into Parliament, it is not really about party lines, but it's about your own legal conscience or your own conscience as a human being, as a person has been sent to Parliament to look after the needs of all South Africans. So I think even if they would come back and say, I as a speaker am vetoing, or I'm saying that you are all going to vote in an open ballot or in a group process, I think they will quickly go to court and say, can the court really intervene, or can the court intervene in this case? And then look at the rules of parliament. Let's look at the intention of voting. Let's look at the intention, the purpose of the secret vote, and it could be achieved on this one. So to sort of die down the noise, or to prevent any legal wrangles from taking place, then the speaker can bow down to that pressure and say, okay, I do agree, let's go by way of secret ballot. And on that basis, we'll then agree and come back whether that particular process is fair or not. But the importance of it is this. You can't really stop these impeachment processes from taking place. If you engage in anything which is going to try and stop them, it's going to be really trying to stop the inevitable at the end of the day. Where it really matters, and I think Prof has alluded to this, it is when the results of the impeachment proceedings are then going to come out, and if they don't favor the president, then only then you can try and put in all these stops and processes just to make sure that it doesn't move forward. But trying to stop it at this infant stage is not going to assist anyone. So even if you say, let's go by way of a secret ballot, I do not think it's going to assist in any manner. It's just simply going to increase the legal wrangles which are going to go on in our courts. And our courts have been very clear when it comes to how members of parliament should act, their allegiance toward political parties, and their allegiance to making sure that they are voting to what is in the best interest of the members of the public.
Mr. Saga, let me release you and thank you very much for your views and your insights this evening.
Thank you very much.
On that same question, you wouldn't differ with Mr. Saga on that one, would you?
Well, I think, the Constitutional Court, and I think that's where to start, has been very clear that Parliament does have a duty to hold the executive to account. So if you're now in a situation where a Section 89 panel has said there's a sufficient evidence that the president has misconducted himself, has violated the law and the Constitution, I think that makes it very difficult for Parliament to not be in a position to vote in favor of this inquiry or take steps that seem to squash the next step of the process. So in a way, I agree with him in the sense that it's neither here nor there, whether there's a secret ballot or not, which we know there's an element of discretion on the Speaker around whether triggering that. But I think what is important is what we've seen from the Constitutional Court is that Parliament does have a duty now to ensure that the President is held to account.
Prof, I mean, you've written a lot about this organization and as a party in government as well. Yes, it may have changed a lot over, the last while. But what do you think is foremost in the minds of, one, those who want Cyril Ramaphosa to stay on, and two, those who want to get rid of them? What do you think are the conversations between and among them this evening as they go to that crucial NEC meeting tomorrow?
They definitely would think of how it is affecting ANC power. They would be thinking about 2024 and how they can play this moment to still come out on top in 2024.
Do you think they go that far?
I think they
don't think,
do.
Some people reckon, everyone now is about the next couple of weeks.
I really think they think that far, because Cyril Ramaphosa has been pivotal, previous election and still possibly the run-up to the next election, pivotal in bringing in the impression. I don't know if to some extent there's a little bit of reality in it as well, but definitely the image and the impression of this is a part of the ANC, the dominant part of the ANC, so the argument goes, that is serious about cleaning up and getting the country on an even keel, getting the economy right, yes, and fighting corruption in a very serious way. And they need that image in order to still get a majority in the next election. And if Cyril Ramaphosa is now totally discarded and discredited, they can probably forget about it. Because there is a lot of trust, even if he has it is seriously dented, damaged, even if that of the ANC, as we hear heard the Integrity Committee and Mkhalema Motlanthe say the ANC's credibility has been affected by that. So how the ANC plays this particular moment is incredibly important. But then they also want to get rid, many of them want to get rid of President Ramaphosa. And they would have to, but they would still have to play that game. They haven't developed an alternative game. That was the game that definitely worked with the non-Ramaphosa people in 2017. And they haven't developed an alternative way to get the vote that is bigger than the ANC loyal membership.
Mr. Swana, I mean, ahead of tomorrow's NEC meeting, ahead of the elective conference in about 2 weeks' time, are the various factions, irrespective of who's supporting who, really, you know, approaching things with 2024 in mind, from where you sit?
Absolutely. I think that is the case. And I think that any accommodation that Cyril Ramaphosa will get will be to say, guys, our ship is sinking, and the ANC ship is sinking, and I don't buy into this notion that Ramaphosa can save the ANC, this, that, and the other. There's a lot of damage that has continued, including the July insurrection last year, and the 2019 elections and the loss of the metros. Things have been getting worse, certainly in his home province. Remember, Ramaphosa is from Gauteng, he's from Shawela, Soweto. So Ramaphosa's province, home province, the ANC is taking a pounding. They are losing control. And the ANC, under the leadership of Ramaphosa, is becoming a distinctly rural party, where some of the newest arguments that we're having here tonight don't even matter that much. So the issue here is that the ANC is losing the urban vote regardless of Ramaphosa. But what I think Tony Yengeni and company, Carl Niehaus and them will have to do is to say, can we have a comradely departure on the part of the president? Because he's on that route for now, he's definitely on the way out in terms of this report and the processes that follow.
Say he stays, Mr. Perry. It's not, of course, I mean, and he survives Tuesday, as well as your fellow panelists are predicting. It's still not the end of the road. Even if he gets elected in December, the parliamentary inquiry may still continue.
Yes, and I think that's an important consideration, because the scope of the parliamentary inquiry is that these allegations are going to be tested on a much more stringent basis. That committee will have the power to subpoena witnesses. It will have the power to call for the relevant documentation from anybody that has an ability to share the documentation. So we're going to see a much more detailed level of inquiry. And I don't think that is ideal to be hanging over a sitting president, to have the type of questions. And you must remember that the panel report pointed that committee to where it should go. It said there are glaring gaps around these particular areas. You know, when you look at that and you look at the line of inquiry, it's not going to be pleasant for the president.
Prof, won't a lot also depend on whether or not, who wins come December?
To some extent, Vuyo, yes. But irrespective of whether Ramaphosa stands and wins or loses, I totally agree. That process is inevitable. It will unfold. It's whether Ramaphosa is still president of the country and the ANC at that stage, and how embarrassing that could be, how humiliating that could be for a president of the country. So yes, who wins at Nasrec definitely is going to hang right over this whole process where it is going. And there will be many moments where they would wish they had never been there, because there's no winning in going through a parliamentary inquiry like that.
Saswana, I'm putting you on the block. What do you think is going to happen?
I
I'm talking narrowly now about what will happen, whether Cyril Ramaphosa stays or goes, and if, after that, then goes on to contest the position of ANC president.
My inclination would be to say Cyril Ramaphosa goes on short notice, or he goes next year. Cyril Ramaphosa cannot go to 2024. That is my. He cannot go to 2024. If the inquiry goes on whilst he's still on the campaign trail for the ANC, he will reduce the capital of the political capital of the ANC. So they've got to find a mechanism over the next 18 months of getting rid of him, actually. So I think the issue here would be the timing. We're only discussing timing now.
For you, bro?
Yes, I was thinking ANC presidencies and that toxic zone between the conference and the next election. I think Ramaphosa would do himself a favor by getting out now, because there's so much ammunition, and this panel has given a lot of extra ammunition to his opponents. If he does not win, or even if he does win at Nasrec, if he stands, it will be as good as if he had not been winning. And we know the kind of turmoil that follows. As if now, the turmoil we see now is not already totally hectic.
Mr. Peter, I know a lot of people don't like litigation, don't like these kinds of processes. They pity us against one another. There's all these arguments and fights even outside of these political parties. But one thing you cannot dismiss or deny is that over the years, our laws have actually been enriched. Our constitution has actually come to life. People know exactly what their responsibilities are. They may not, deliver, on what their responsibilities are. But Parliament knows that it has a duty and a responsibility, to play that oversight role. The courts may not like the fact that they have to do sometimes what Parliament is supposed to do, but they understand also that, these rulings have to be made for the sake of our democracy. Do you think we'll be richer, after this episode as well? It would add, to the body, of laws and information that have taken us up to this point.
Absolutely. I certainly think a big dividend that has come from the Zuma years and also the ANC factional battles has been the enriching of our constitutional and administrative laws in this country. And already we are one step ahead of where we were in the Zuma years. And I think for sure there is a new dawn on presidential accountability as a result of this inquiry.
Let me thank all of you for coming through this evening. Really appreciated it indeed. And I hope that you as the viewer have been enlightened. One or two things have become clearer after the conversation we have just had. And that's where we're going to leave it. The Watchdog team will be back again tomorrow evening, same time. You don't want to miss that.
Do you want permanent solutions for your long-lasting health